We are on a mission to help brands reimagine the online shopping experience, an experience that gets results. Today, marketing is simply not enough to grow your business. So we're going to show you how improving the user experience can help drive better results into your online store. For a moment, let's just imagine what it's like to shop inside a retail store. What do retail stores really have? The experience in a retail store is fairly unique and very convenient. Retail stores have different departments. They're organized with unique categories to help you discover curated collections. Inside a retail store, you have a salesperson or salespeople ready and willing to help you answer any questions and help you find whatever you may need. And when it comes to products inside a store, you can touch it, you can feel it, you can try products on, you can compare products to one another. You have dressing rooms, you have mirrors, you have all the available options to help you make a purchase. A purchase that's not only going to make you happy, but will also make you feel accomplished. Now, imagine if you took all of that away. Imagine a store where you put all the products in one area, and then in the back of that store, you have one single employee sitting next to a cash register, and the only thing that employee knows to do is how to take a payment and provide you with a receipt. A store where people have to figure everything out on their own. Now that sounds like a great shopping experience, right? Now imagine how your marketing dollars would be wasted if you spent all your money driving foot traffic into the store. Imagine how the visitors would feel in such an environment. So the sad, unfortunate fact is this is what online shopping feels like today. Many companies waste a lot of money on marketing and they drive traffic that simply doesn't convert. Research shows about 97% of visitors don't make a purchase. So I want you guys to think about it for a minute. Some of you do not run e-commerce stores, some of you do, but just in general, this is a giant number. And so marketing dollars that are spent trying to drive traffic to your website are wasted only to see your users leave. We've asked ourselves, what is the cause of this problem? The true reason why conversions are so low is because online shopping is a self-serving process. In other words, people have to figure things out on their own. And in a world of assumptions, templated websites, and one-size-fits-all shopping experiences, it's no wonder that many companies have a hard time growing their business. We want to help you win the customer. In order to win the customer, we have to put the user at the center of the experience ecosystem. Elaine and I will get into individual details and walk you step by step how to improve your website and put the customer first. First, I'd like you guys to take a look at the ecosystem. The ecosystem requires a lot of moving parts, from technical architecture to processes to data to your marketing channels to your fulfillment centers. All of that is to serve a particular customer. And so we must succeed where most fail is start the experience with what's important to the customer. Now, let's talk about business goals. Clearly defining your business goals and what you expect out of your website will help you create the foundation for the entire experience. Some goals may include trying to sell more products. Maybe you're looking to generate more leads. Maybe you're hoping to increase your subscriptions. Every business has different goals, and we advise you to sit down and have a full meeting with everyone involved in your business to try to figure out what are the most important business goals your website has to serve. You have your business, and the business has its own goals. But as a part of the ecosystem, your website plays a major role, and the website has to have its own business goals set up and aligned. Setting up business goals will allow you to narrow your focus. It will help you improve your messaging. It will help you concentrate your marketing efforts to support these goals. But most importantly, the business goals will help you define the optimal user experience. Let's get into the user experience a little bit more. Two of the major key factors in the user experience is performance and analytics. Two things work side by side. I'd like to start with performance first. We want to focus on performance simply because a slow user experience is basically equivalent to standing in line in a store. If you remember when we used to go shopping in retail and we'd spend a bunch of time running around and trying things on and figuring things out and talking to salespeople and finally making a decision to buy a bunch of products, and then we'd get in line to just stand there and wait for 15 to 20 minutes to check out for the store to take our money. And that was a very frustrating experience. And very often retail stores used to suffer drop off on the checkouts. The same thing is happening today with websites. If websites don't load within milliseconds, each individual page needs to load within milliseconds to grab the attention of the user, you will have a very high bounce rate. So performance is very, very important. Things that impact performance, something that you could take back to your tech team. Your database might be overbloated. Your theme might be overbloated with different scripts. Your underlying foundation, the technical foundation of your servers or your hosting providers, might need to be upgraded. So there's different things that impact websites, and there's different optimization techniques that you should apply. But the goal, first and foremost, is to have a very fast loading user experience. Now, moving on to analytics. Analytics should be your best friend of every business owner, of every marketing director, because analytics literally keeps the finger on the pulse of your business. With analytics, you can track the amount of visitors you have. You can track the source of these visitors. Which channels are performing for you? Is it social media driven channels? Is it search? Is it organic? What are people searching on your website? Google Analytics will tell you as well. The amount of bounce rate, how many people came and left your website? How many people came and stuck around, and for how long? And of course, a very important factor is what is your conversion rate? So analytics gives you a bouquet of tools, a bouquet of information that you need to dig through to consistently improve and optimize your user experience. The one thing I do want to say is that you must keep in mind, e-commerce is constantly evolving. It's constantly changing. And so in order for you to keep up with the demand and keep up with user behavior and user expectations, analytics is one of the greatest ways to do that. At this moment, I'd like to hand over the wheel to Elaine, and Elaine's going to talk to us about how design-driven companies have proven to be much, much more successful than average companies.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Elaine, and I'm going to pick off where Yuri left off with the analytics. So in design, what we typically say is that the analytics tell you what is happening on your site. So it can kind of point to what kinds of problems people are having, where they're having those problems, but it doesn't really tell you why people are having problems. And so that's where design comes in, because it can kind of help you take this really complex customer experience ecosystem that Yuri spoke about and make sense of it all. It can kind of help you create a narrative. So one of the things that we've found is that design-driven companies typically outperform the S&P over a 10-year period. About 5 years ago, the Design Management Institute ran a big study, and they realized that design-driven companies are significantly more profitable in the long run than companies that don't really put a design ethos at their center. These are companies like Target, IBM. Typically when you think about innovation and design, they come to mind. And so we know that it is a really great way to drive profitability. It's a really great way to create a working environment where people feel comfortable with innovation and failure. And so I'm here to talk to you a little bit about what some of those design-driven activities will look like. So the very first thing about design is that design, when we talk about it, it's not just about the aesthetics. That's a really big part of design, graphic design, but it's also about communication design. It's about design research. It's kind of looking at people's behaviors and their intentions, and then understanding how you can align those issues with your business goals. And that's why Yuri started with the business goals, is because so often I found that companies don't have clearly defined business goals, or They maybe worked on them a year ago at an offsite, but they're not really living those goals in their day-to-day behavior. And so we can kind of show you how having some of those goals and then having good customer research can drive a better sort of overall design experience for the customer. So starting with research. I would love for everyone in the webinar to maybe take a moment in the chat and just, if you're doing any customer research, share it with us. How comfortable are you? How frequently are you speaking with your customers? Are you running surveys, usability studies, stakeholder interviews, customer interviews, field studies, any of those items? I'd love to hear about it in the chat, so please just take a moment. And even if you're not doing anything, but you're curious, you can say that as well. We would just love to know kind of what the baseline for the audience is performing and acting on customer research. I'm a big fan of it, to the point where when I work on projects, it's something that I just integrate into my overall design process. I have a background in graphic design, and I always start with extensive research. I always try and talk to customers. I put together very simple surveys, things like, what are 3 things that worked really well for you and 3 things that didn't, is a great start for customer research. And then that kind of allows you to create personas, and those are archetypes. So when you're looking at an ecosystem and when you're talking about a system of service delivery, then it's really helpful to describe common user needs. And the purpose for having those commonalities, again, is it creates internal alignment. Your IT team, your guest services team, your marketing team, your executive team, they all serve the customer in very different ways. And so having those personas kind of creates like a shared vision for who that customer is that you're trying to reach. And it can kind of help you understand customers that are having bad experiences because the website isn't sort of speaking to them, even though you're getting a lot of that particular traffic from that particular type of persona or type of user. Or maybe you're trying to reach into a new market and you want to understand what that type of person is going to be looking for when they come to the site, what some of the common behaviors that will be shared among those types of people, like such as a browsing shopper. You can use personas to help describe that and tell a little bit of a story around it. So doing research, there's a laundry list of potential methodologies and formats that you can draw from. Some companies, they have people with PhDs doing research, and that's really wonderful and very methodical. If you're Bloomberg, that makes a lot of sense. If you're a company like Tiffany or Kendra Scott, I think just having cross-functional teams that are sharing the research and making an effort, setting up very simple usability labs, using services such as usertesting.com to put up, prototype, give people feedback on your existing website. Going to the coffee shop down the street is a great place to go. But the act of watching somebody else use a website that I'm designing or preparing to do design work from gives me kind of a basis of design-driven information that separates it from my opinion. And that's really important because as an e-commerce designer, it's really easy to slip into my expertise. There are certain things about the e-commerce funnel that are really standardized and that you don't really want to mess with too much. But then every business has different goals, right? So if you have those goals well defined, you can understand, like I've done work for department stores in the past where the store had a third-party, a loyalty program with a third-party credit card. And that was a really big business goal of theirs, was to promote this third-party, this in-store card. And that flow would take people away from the traditional shopping experience. But because it was so important, we wanted to really make sure that it was quite seamlessly integrated. And to be perfectly honest, some of our early design decisions, we found flaws in them because we were having other people look at the site. And some of those flaws were, like I said, pointed out by the guy at the coffee shop down the street from my office. And so I wouldn't have seen that because I was thinking about other work that I had done for like smaller organizations, and the design solutions that I had found in those contexts didn't translate as well for a larger department store. But I wasn't aware of that until I showed those sites to somebody else and was able to kind of pick their brain about it a little bit. This is just a really great overall list of sort of categorized user testing options that you can draw from, depending on what stage of a project you're at. If you're really early on and you're kind of doing discovery, I almost always do user interviews, stakeholder interviews, and requirements gathering. Stakeholder interviews and requirements gathering are internal activities, so talking to IT and kind of figuring out what are the limitations of the platform we're working on. Salesforce, I think, has a multi-page checkout. Magento has a single-page checkout. Those are really important things to know before you start the design process, because especially if you're in an agency, you don't want to sell a client on a design idea that the platform can't handle or would require an enormous change order. That's quite embarrassing to have to walk back, and I've been there and done that. So, really taking some effort to talk to people about what technical requirements are, what the business requirements are, can help create a better customer experience down the road. And then the same with things like accessibility evaluation, analytics reviews, search log analysis. Those are all really great ways to kind of get out there and figure out like what's happening, what are people's expectations, where are their minds at when they're coming to our site, and where are they experiencing pain points that we can potentially find opportunities to solve. This is an example of a consumer persona. The thing that I really like about this is that Dolby has created two very different consumers, and they've boiled it down into just some really simple, common user stories that tell ways that their product can sort of target these people and create different experiences without significant changes to, they can kind of create different content on the site that appeal to these consumers without significant changes to the overall content, tone, and voice of their brand. So, you can see that Tim is somebody who uses their product when he is seeking to relax. And so having content on the site that maybe appeals to opportunities to create these really immersive experiences within the home that are going to be where he can calibrate a lot of settings and create the experience that he likes, versus Megan, who is the more outgoing persona. So she is the person who wants to use Dolby products to bring lots of people and make her place like the go-to spot. And that's a very different type of content that she's going to be seeking out and looking for when she's considering purchasing a Dolby product. But you wouldn't really know that unless you've taken the time to kind of filter down research and conversations with your consumers and kind of trying to figure out like what are these common behavioral patterns that people are thinking about when they come to purchase one of our products. And then you can craft content and stories that will appeal to them as soon as they land on your site. So just a really quick overview of how to do customer research. You always kind of want to start with a learning plan. And so that's what this overview kind of shows is you really only need a couple of hours to just sit down with some folks around you and then brainstorm. And you want to use it when you're trying to improve a process or workflow, understand shopping habits, evaluate a new design concept, test usability, or refine a value proposition. So what is the service that we're trying to deliver on to our customers? And then you always kind of want to start with what you know. As I mentioned, as an e-commerce designer, I have a lot of sort of built-in assumptions about what the e-commerce process should look like, and also about like just what consumer behavior looks like online. And so I try to really get that out and just say it and have it in written text so I can gut check with other people around me. Sometimes people, because I've written it down into just, honestly, it's just like a list most of the time. It's like, I expect that consumers who are buying product X are looking for this, and this. Sometimes I'll even go out into the world and be the consumer so that I can help draw out my own assumptions and then share it with the people around me so that we can brainstorm a list of questions that we might want to propose to people when we're doing just having conversational interviews. And then, so I typically will kind of like write up a really loose example of, what is our typical user trying to do? And then I'll just set up some really simple questions. Why are they trying to buy this product online? What type of experience do they expect to have? How does that experience differ from if they're purchasing in person? Do they expect to have an experience very similar to the in-person experience when they're shopping online, or can it be completely reinvented? Those are really important questions to ask. And because you're asking it across a small segment of people, it can help you start to identify common behaviors. And so sometimes you might see yourself in those behaviors, and then other times you might see like, oh my gosh, we're totally missing this segment of the population over here that's expecting a different type of experience, and we can design for that. Process questions are also really useful, even for a web store. Understanding how they actually use the product once they get it into their home is a really great thing, because it can tell you, like, do I need to start feeding instructions early in the shopping experience so that they actually use the product, and then that will lead to more loyalty in the long run. Questions like that are great to surface. Interviews really only take me like between 10 and 15 minutes, depending on the level of complexity, and I'll start with like 2 or 3 people. And then from there, if I start to see lots of variations, or it's like I see something that I think is really interesting, but maybe it's not necessarily repeated in 1 or 2 of the other surveys, then I'll kind of try and find a couple more people and tease out that idea, such as maybe only one person comments on the fact that they expect the online shopping experience to be very similar to the in-person, that might be something I want to tease out with more specific questions in a different user segment group. And so you can kind of have a lot of fun. I think talking to customers is really exciting because I get so many ideas and I love doing it early on. And that's why I really encourage everyone else to just make it part of their everyday process and their habit, because it's really a great source of information and innovation. So what we found is that 72% of consumers are more eager to buy from digitally innovative companies or digitally innovative retailers. And so how do you create digitally innovative experiences? Well, you have to look at the whole ecosystem. You have to start with a really holistic overview of what's happening on your web store and figure out where are the opportunities to create this excitement. And that's what customer journey maps are for. They help you see your business through your customer's eyes. So there's always a gap, right? Every company, these are really complex environments, even e-commerce, which is really probably one of the more mature spaces to work in the digital space. There's still always a gap between your customers' needs and wants and what they actually experience. And so once you've looked at those analytics and you've figured out where you're having problems with drop off, or you're not getting the kind of retention on a page that you'd like to see, you can start to figure out where is that gap. We put all this effort in setting up this beautiful landing page, promoting this new feature. We've got this new product line coming out and people aren't looking at it. Okay, what's going on? That's what a customer journey map is for. So this is a customer journey map for a grocery store. This is a very in-depth version of a customer journey map. So I'm starting with this because I think it shows you all the different ways that you can tackle it in one place. Depending on the scope of your project, you don't need to do all of this. Sometimes I just map the experience, which is this line that you see across the center, and attach it to emotional feelings. I almost always have touch points. Those really typically don't change a lot in the e-commerce experience, and the same with the stage. That doesn't change a lot either. I almost always use the same set of stages unless I'm looking at a particular sub-segment, an in-store credit card or some sort of loyalty program. And then here are those business goals that we've been promoting so much. And you really can't figure out where these opportunities are if you don't have business goals and you don't have metrics to line up with them. How are you going to know if you're successful? I like this map because they've linked in who's responsible within the organization for each stage. And they're also looking at what are the technology systems, especially with e-commerce. We have so many wonderful third-party opportunities. They're always popping up. It's hard to stay ahead of the edge there sometimes. And so if you're looking at where the different systems are plugging into the customer experience, it can tell you a lot about what might be causing the drop off. I did work for an accessories brand that was still kind of in the startup space, although they had opened some brick and mortar stores. And they had a really wonderful customization feature on their website, but it did not work on mobile. It was a horrible experience. And so when I was talking to their in-house e-commerce team, they really had no idea that it just wasn't working because they had plugged it in and then they've gotten overwhelmed with other features. But when we looked at the analytics, it was getting a lot of attention, but the sales weren't there. And so, kind of seeing, okay, well, the sales aren't there, but people seem to like it. There's clearly a gap. What do we need to do to kind of make some really simple improvements? And then we just brainstorm a list of ideas and prioritize them in terms of what was feasible in terms of the available resources, and kind of trying to figure out what was the lowest hanging fruit without scrapping the whole project altogether or the whole service altogether. This is another version of a customer journey map. This is a project that I worked on. As you can see, they can also be really messy. They're great for alignment. You almost always want to build out a customer journey map with other people in the team. So you're talking to your IT department, you're talking to guest services, you've got the e-commerce, marketing, whatever all the different teams are that are involved in the website. It's great. So you can see these blue Post-it notes along the top. Those are very similar to the stages and the touch points that I showed in the previous map. And then these yellow Post-it notes, a lot of them are actually kind of repeated. So you can see that different people were writing down kind of the same idea on the Post-it note. And then we were able to look at a lot of people are thinking similarly in this space, but not so many people are paying attention to some of the stuff that's happening here in the middle. And then just a really simple, what's good and what's not good about the experience at this page, and then kind of mapping it with questions that the customer would be asking at that point in the process. So you can kind of see getting close to cart and checkout. If we're not showing, this was for a B2B chemical product, automotive paint. And you can see that you need a lot of different types of mix-ins, and there were lots of combinations to make the final product. And it got really complex, and we could see that we were losing a lot of goodwill at that stage because customers felt like they weren't confident that they were buying the correct combination of products. And so what we did to solve that problem was we created on the product detail page a slide out screen that would show the customer what products they needed to mix in with that specific product. So it was really easy for them to add the product to the cart and then move to purchase like the mix-ins that they needed for that specific product, instead of having to go back into navigation or back up to the product listing grid. So how do you make a customer journey map? We start with keeping it really simple. Have fun with it. So usually it takes at least about a day, and that's assuming that you already have done a little bit of customer research. It's great, like I said, if you want a complete picture of what's the connections between your web store and your business processes. You're looking for opportunities to improve your UX. Maybe you have prioritization conflicts within the organization. IT wants to put resources towards this. E-commerce wants to put resources towards merchandising. And you also, it's a great way to just create a customer-focused mentality within your organization. You always want to begin with defining the scope. A lot of times I won't even look, especially if it's like a new store, I won't look so closely at usage and loyalty because I really want to get interest, consideration, and purchase down. You want to list out all of your touch points. Those are really easy. You can Google. There are tons of great e-commerce customer journey maps out there that'll give you a good sense of all the e-commerce touch points. Then you want to plot the data, and that's just answering these questions that you see down here along the left, and brainstorm opportunities. How can we best address the pain points that we've identified? So we know that 21% of consumers abandon purchase due to checkout being too complicated. And that gets back to that flow. So understanding some of the basics about like best standards and guidelines in e-commerce can help you improve your checkout experience. It can help you improve those along those stages. And it can really help give you a sense of the range of issues that designers need to consider at every step of the process. And that's where usability guidelines come in, especially as the field of like customer-centered design and design thinking has become more mature over the years. There are tons of really great usability guidelines out there to help you understand the standards and best practices to keep your web store current. And this is like not thinking like we need to integrate VR and AR experiences, but this is like, is our navigation working for us? Are we up to standard with accessibility issues? Is our homepage focused and is our content clear? That range of issues that designers need to consider is really important in being able to kind of, it's almost like a checklist, really. Like you can kind of scan it and figure out like, oh, I need these 4 different things to happen on my homepage, but this isn't like a product, it's a web store, so I don't need to worry about some of these other things. You can kind of create the checklist that's appropriate for you based on a lot of the usability guidelines and assessment tools that are already existing. And the reason that usability guidelines are so important, in addition to identifying the range of issues, is that it helps you avoid the negative impact of like opinion-driven design. So again, alignment is everything here, because you can point to these usability guidelines and you can say, we know that like having content accompanying images is the best practice because it makes our website more accessible, and that's a legal issue that has to be dealt with on the e-commerce team. And so that gets you out of the opinion-driven space, which I think is important in design. So what do usability guidelines look like? I've picked 5 that I think are just kind of really easy starting places, but there are, especially that like usability.gov, which is run by the government, has like 250-page document of potential usability guidelines that can be used across any different type of product. So this kind of just boils it down very simply. Things like captions and alt tags, mobile responsiveness, having a good information architecture. And so what do some of those guidelines look like? Providing text, as I've mentioned, having a visible back button, and using common search terms. So looking at your search analytics and figuring out what are people searching for, and then making sure that those are really top of mind inside of the navigation. Making your website intuitive means starting with decisions about content, format, and navigation before deciding on colors and decorative graphics. Content and tone, using a really active voice, making sure that the story you're telling about the brand resonates with the personas that you've built, and using clear calls to action. So, making sure that customers, when they land on your site, there's an immediate opportunity to dig deeper. You want to definitely make sure that those clear calls to action exist. And then having the information not repeated, but having like variants on the story that are addressing different personas as they navigate down the page as they scroll. And so what does that look like in the real world? I pulled a couple of examples, Zara and Nike, so we can kind of look. I think Zara is a really interesting example because they tend to flaunt almost all e-commerce standards, but they get away with it really well. So I think Zara really knows their customer, right? This is a web store for a female who is coming to either browse lifestyle content or search. Those are like the two things front of mind. Like clearly, very trendy aesthetic, a lot of lifestyle content, but then, the calls to actions for men and kids are really buried off to the side. And even the information about store openings with COVID, it's not a top banner. It's way at the bottom. Like they know their people are here to buy online and they're happy to support that. And if they want to go into the store, it's great, but definitely not a priority in this instance. And then compare that next to Nike, right? Nike has different sub-brands. So they've got that up at the top alongside the Nike symbol. They know that people who are shopping on the Nike store are looking for the newest product. So that's the first thing in the navigation, new releases, before you even get into the gender options, men, women, kids, pretty standard. Customize, I actually think reflects a business goal for the custom shoes. They want to drive a lot of traffic to there because that product has been a big initiative for them for the past couple of years. Free shipping and 60-day returns, even their COVID-19 statements. There's a ton of information here, but it's all designed in such a way that you can really quickly identify where do I need to go. If you don't find where you need to go, by the time you get over to the side here, there's search, right? So people tend to browse websites from the top left over. So if you don't see the things you need here, you get over here to the primary shop navigation, still not really sure where you need to go. Now you're at search, you can just type something in and see if you can find what you're looking for.
So just to summarize, again, having a good experience in your store has become an important part to retain your customers. And so while you are promoting your business and spending a lot of money on marketing, the user experience cannot go unnoticed. And so bad UX will affect your revenue. It will affect your potential customers. And a UX audit, whether it's done by you or by an external agency, will give you great results. So user experience audit will help you figure out how to increase conversion rate, how to reduce your bounce rate, how to increase customer loyalty, reduce customer support, and obviously maximize ROI on your marketing dollars. There's a lot of unknowns and hidden opportunities within your website and your experience. When you dig deeply inside all the analytics, all the designs, all the user research, all the business goals, when you put all these things together, you can uncover a lot of great opportunities to help you to increase sales and grow your business. So we do offer a user experience audit. If anybody is interested, we will shoot you guys an email with this video, with a copy of the deck, and we'll even include a complimentary questionnaire that you can utilize yourself to run your own user research, which we encourage very much. So there is a question. I have a hard time understanding my analytics information. Any tips? So analytics is basically, it's a lot of data coming in. If you don't know how to dig through them a lot, focus on the major key factors. You need to know how much traffic you're getting per month. You need to know how much of that traffic is leaving your website, which is a bounce rate, which means somebody came to your website and left immediately. You do need to understand where this traffic came from so that you can try to focus your efforts into places where the traffic is coming from better. And you need to look at your conversion rates and also pay attention how much time people are spending on your website. Just a side tip, when you're doing marketing, if you're running paid social or paid search, there's an option to do retargeting, and you don't want to retarget every single customer that comes to your website, which is a huge mistake a lot of businesses do. You only want to retarget customers that spend a good amount of time on your website. So anywhere between 2 minutes and up that a visitor spent, and analytics does track every single visitor and they'll organize it for you. You can indicate to retarget only customers that spend 2 minutes or more on your website.
I want to just touch on that one also. Google Analytics will show you your site's search analytics, and I think that's something that you should that for me personally, when I start a new e-commerce project, that's like the first thing I ask for from a client. It's part of my list of requests for resources, because it'll tell you what people are doing, and it'll show you loads of opportunities for ways to improve your navigation, for ways to improve your content. It'll help you understand what people aren't finding and they're looking for. And so if you can surface that even more, the people that are searching for it are the ones that are motivated to find it. So think about if that's just the tip of the iceberg, all the people that are there looking for it, but they're not bothering to search.
So next question is, in your experience, what are the top 3 reasons for an abandoned cart? Checkout is the most important area on the website. And most of the time the failure happens of bombardment of a lot of information that we request from a customer. So creating smoother checkouts or a more elegant way to ask for information is very important. We do recommend utilizing third-party resources like Amazon Pay or PayPal, the more popular payment processing services that will allow customers to simply check out with one click of a button. Registration and taking the time to pull out your credit card, that all delays a lot of time. Particularly, this is a problem on mobile. Many people really drop off on mobile because it's very convenient. When you're shopping as you're walking, right? A lot of people travel and shop. And so, as soon as they hit the checkout part, they start to fuss with the wallet. They don't really want to take it out in public, and then they just close off and leave, and they very frequently do not come back. But if you have something like Amazon Pay or PayPal, they could just click it, quickly log in, run the processing, and the experience is much easier.
So I'm actually going to say that the abandoned cart I think that transactional emails are so often undervalued in this instance. A lot of people add things to their cart because they're just kind of browsing, and then they think they're going to come back later, and then they don't really hear anything meaningful from you as a brand. And so they just don't come back. I recommend looking at Brooklinen. I think they're doing a phenomenal job with some of these abandoned cart emails, and their follow-up it converted me. I wasn't really, so anecdotally, I think it's a really great example. But I think those follow-up emails having really, if you understand your customer, you're going to understand that whole transactional lifestyle down to abandoned cart. So what kind of story are they responding to? And then you just reiterate that story in email, and you kind of just keep hitting them at a rate that is reasonable. Of course, you don't want to lose people, but you definitely want to kind of follow up and be like, hey, we saw that it's really hot out and you were looking at this particular kind of comforter, and you can kind of wrap a story. I'm doing a terrible job telling their story, but you can kind of wrap a little bit of a story around that so that you're kind of reminding them of the problem. Yeah, my comforter is making me too hot. I'm not sleeping well. But here's a solution that kind of just keeps popping up in my inbox. And the branding is really calming. They've kind of got a sense of humor. So maybe I'll go back and take a second look at this product. And then you get back and you're they almost always have some kind of discount tied to it. And then you're well, I'm getting an extra 5% off anyway. So maybe I'll just go ahead and, in the cart page, it shows I can really easily just charge $250 comforter to my PayPal credit account, and I know that I have a payment plan on there that lasts 6 months. So I can just kind of pay it off until I'm ready. And so you if you're looking at the overall ecosystem of how the customer is thinking about that, I think it makes a lot more sense, and it makes it a lot easier to tell the story. And I think that kind of leads into Brian's question. Good quality content. Yes, always. Take the time to tell a story that your customer likes and that they're responding to and that they feel seen by. That's definitely going to, I think you need less. If you can have really focused, high quality content that's just appealing to one type of customer, I think that's going to serve you much better in the long run with the loyalty approach, as opposed to mediocre content that just kind of feels like it's out of the box or just checking a list, checking boxes off of the list.
Which I think the key factor that people need to remember, that there's an entire user experience ecosystem. It's not you just abandon the cart. You actually have to take every step possible to design a convenient cart, but then be aware what happens if the cart is abandoned. Because people leave for numerous reasons. They could be distracted, they could be not ready to buy. There needs to be continuity with what happens to that user. So it's not just the abandonment of the cart, but it's also the entire ecosystem, which obviously content, good quality content plays a role from beginning to the end, right? How you've presented the product in the beginning. Did you show enough images? Did you show some video? Did you show product benefits visually? Were you able to speak the language? Was the messaging correct? And just like Elaine mentioned, right? Are you speaking to a problem? Every product essentially solves a problem of some sort. And so if we're talking about problem, solution, and a result aspect, then the ecosystem becomes very strong and everything ties in together.
Yuri gets a little bit tired of hearing me talk about this, but one of my favorite transitions in the business space over the past couple of years is in customer experience. And this idea that it's not like the brand pushing out to the customer. It's the customer coming to you and saying like what they need and what they want. And then because you have those business goals, it makes it a lot easier to tailor the message when you have it sort of an inward push of information and an inward push of interest.
I'm going to take a moment to thank Accessories Council, Karen, Lean, and Dominique for setting this up. It's been a real pleasure. We appreciate the opportunity to speak here. And so if anybody has any more questions or if they would like to know more, Elaine, if you switch to the next slide, our information is below. We're happy to help, nanowebgroup.com. You can always check out the user experience audit section for more info. We will be publishing this video soon and we'll shoot an email to everyone.
Yes, we will send it over later today with the recording, and then if you want to get in touch with Yuri or Elaine, we can also set that up and connect you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. Any feedback, we love to hear it. If you found it useful, if you found it found it not useful, please feel free to shoot us one thing that worked well and one thing that didn't. We'd be happy to receive it.
Thank you guys, that was great.
Great, thank you guys.
Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.